Well, hi everybody. Meteorologist Joe Chaffee. Welcome to tonight's Joe Chaffee Weather Show. And hopefully we won't have the fiasco we had at the end of the Sunday morning show, which was my audio just went. The Windows 10 has struck again, changed all the settings on my all the audio settings all over the place on my computer. I don't know why or what triggered it, but it did. And now, just before I started this live stream, excuse me, catching my breath. Just before I started this live stream, got a warning here that it's not buffering very well. So if the audio sounds good, and a few of you have already said so, that's a good thing. Hopefully it's not crackling or any hot spots, and hopefully you won't have any video problems. So let's get two things. I'm a little bit thrown off because of the time today. Had a lot to do. I'm still away down in the great state of Georgia. I'm up in Marietta, Georgia. I drove up here yesterday, so I'm with my grandson and my daughter and my son-in-law, and I spent the day putting up his train sets. Okay, he got the Polar Express last year. This year he's got the Lehigh Valley freighter, and of course, it's the big people. It's the grown-up boys that are really having the most fun out of all of this. But it's been great. And he's sleeping upstairs now, so I don't want to get too loud. Otherwise, I turn the trains on and show them to you. But for those of you who are hooked up with me on Facebook, I did put it up on my personal page, so you can take a look at the Polar Express. And by the way, for you Lionel train fans, I was really impressed. I had never actually physically seen the Polar Express engine and the cars. They are very well built, and now they operate with Bluetooth, which is phenomenal. There's no wires hanging all over the place. It's just great. Okay, so we're done with that part of it. Now let's talk about where we're going over the next couple of days, because we do have this snow situation coming up for Tuesday. But before we even, I'm sorry, for Wednesday. But before we even get to that, it's raining out quite a bit across the Northeast. So we're going to focus on that for the moment. There's not a whole lot from the standpoint of watches and warnings that are up. All we really have, because of the snow cover, and the big eater of snow cover is not necessarily the rain and the warm temperatures, but the fog. Fog really eats away at it, and we've got dense fog advisories up throughout much of the Hudson Valley in upstate New York and southern Vermont and western New Hampshire and northwest Connecticut. And a lot of this is the zone that got the most snow from the storm last week. We also have some winter weather advisories and winter storm warnings up for a small area on the upper peninsula of Michigan and in northern Wisconsin. Wind chill advisories and freezing spray warnings up for parts of the southern half of Lake Superior. Otherwise, really, for the rest of the country, it's pretty quiet. A little bit of fog action out in the west, and that is about it. So even though it's raining pretty hard in the east, it is we don't have any flood watches up. The temperatures have really shot up today. They moved up into the 50s in many locations, but we still have some cold air trapped in the Hudson Valley, where we've got pockets here with temperatures in the mid to upper 30s. But everybody around it, around these pockets, has seen their temperatures zoom up through the 40s, even up into the low 50s in parts of Massachusetts, and upper 40s in southern New Hampshire, southern Vermont, and going up into upstate New York, we're in the mid 40s. So this is a wholesale warm up and down the eastern seaboard, and you can thank low pressure that is sitting right now in Lake Superior, and we are seeing lots of southwest isobars ahead of it, and you've got this frontal boundary that's kind of twisting around through the Appalachians at the very lowest levels of the atmosphere. You're seeing cool air stubbornly holding on. Believe it or not, there was snow cover in the mountains up through the central Appalachians from last week's storm and when we had the upper low go by, and that's probably trapping some cold air down in valley areas up and down the Appalachians, which is why you've got this front analyzed the way it is. And warm air is coming up in eastern North Carolina and South Carolina. We've got temperatures in the 60s and 60s into right up to about the Virginia line, and 50s going everywhere else. But in this pocket, you've got temperatures that are still in the 40s. They're starting to see some of that warmer air basically going over the top of all of this. So eventually, that frontal boundary that you see snaking here is going to disappear. That's along the East Coast. It's all about the low in the lakes that's moving up into Canada that will usher in the next change. And you're seeing a lot of moisture here that's moving through the Northeast. But you also still see this subtropical flow coming out across Baja California into Mexico and Texas. So that's on the back end of this cold front. That's going to be setting up the situation for Wednesday with the stalled frontal boundary and the flat wave that's going to be moving along it. The radar's pretty busy here. Take a look at the Northeast. This is all rain all the way up to Caribou, Maine, down into Maryland and northeastern Virginia. And we've had patches of moderate to heavy rain moving along, and that continues to lift up to the Northeast. We've got some rain and some snow showing up on the radars in parts of the northern lakes. And here's your trailing cold front here that runs back through Arkansas and into Texas, into West Texas, this very narrow band of rain, and probably on the northern fringe of this, where you start to get into some colder air, eventually you're going to be seeing a changeover to some snow. So let's run through what the GFS had to say as far as the next few days are concerned. So our low runs up into Canada. We've got our cold front that approaches the coast tomorrow afternoon, and you can see the GFS actually breaks out a fair amount of snow here through northern Arkansas, in through Tennessee, around the Memphis area, maybe even touching parts of northwest Mississippi, the state of Kentucky into West Virginia. And that front by tomorrow evening is lying right along the coast. It's probably right about here. And of course, you've got a flat wave that's developing on that front that's going to be running out to the northeast. When I say a flat wave, it just basically is a weak low. It doesn't intensify. It just kind of ripples along. The frontal boundary stays in a pretty much a straight line position. You don't have warm fronts pushing all the way up on one side, cold front sweeping down around it on the other, where you get this sort of circular look of the low. It has more of a, if you look at this, you kind of could draw a rectangle on an angle. Let's call it at least a parallel, almost as a parallelogram type look to it in terms of how the precip is structured. Now, this is for 1 a.m. on Wednesday, and we're starting to see colder air pushing down near the coast because you've got, of course, this rather large high that's back through the Dakotas that's pushing both eastward and southward. So that eastward push, important to get cold air in here. And this is at 7 a.m. where we've got snow from northeastern Virginia to up into southeastern New England and into coastal Maine. The darker blues would indicate that the radar's picking up a narrow band of heavier snows there in parts of the Delmarva Peninsula, southern New Jersey, and touching much of Long Island and back over to about Cape Cod and the islands. So it's kind of on the edge there. And look, by 1 o'clock in the afternoon, it's gone. So we're basically talking about a 4 to 6 hour period of snow, and then it moves out and we get a quick shot of cold air. But remember, we've got no blocking in the atmosphere, none. So the pattern is about as progressive as you can get, everything moving rapidly west to east. So the high comes in and it just almost just as quickly goes out, so that by Friday morning, it's already out, early Friday morning, the high is out at Nova Scotia and we can wave goodbye to it. And notice you've got the next round of energy. Remember, we've got a very busy southern part of this jet stream that's shooting weather systems along on a regular basis. And the next one is going to be moving into the Gulf late Thursday into Friday morning, and that starts to generate some rain. And of course, now at this point, all the cold air in the Northeast is gone. So you've got a low that's going to run up the east side of the Appalachians and probably intensify a bit as it moves northward. There could be some rather gusty southeast winds here and a fairly solid heavy rain with this low. Could be a good windswept soaking rain. I know my colleague Joe Rayo used to call them sou'easters because of the fact that you get a strong southeast flow here. You oftentimes can get gales and heavy rains. It kind of simulates a nor'easter, except the wind is from the other direction. But the southeast wind, if it lasts long enough, can cause some pretty serious tidal flooding. So this is something we want to keep an eye on. The gradient actually gets fairly tight here as we move toward with this low, and it moves northward. So there's no cold air. Remember, there's no high that's kind of forcing it to go more to the east and pinching cold air down the eastern seaboard. So it comes up. Looks like we'll get a soaking rain from the Florida Panhandle up through the Carolinas on Friday, and then it moves overnight from Virginia to southern New England. By Saturday morning, most of the rain is north of New York City, and New England's getting just hammered with heavy rain there. And by Saturday afternoon, except for northern Maine, much of it is pretty well done. Some lingering showers behind it, then another shot of cold air and another weaker low that comes in for Sunday into Monday. I haven't really looked that closely into the long range, but in terms of the specifics, but we didn't see anything major from that. Certainly, it looks like a weak system at this point. And again, that active southern stream pushing weather systems along. Now we're running into day 10 and day 11 here in the long range, and we're still seeing weather systems approaching as we go into Christmas week. I wonder whether one of these is going to wind up being maybe something where we've got a colder atmosphere and something more impressive to deal with. I don't know. We'll have to see. There's been hints on the models in the long range with regards to some potential for some the NAO to go negative again. We noticed it on and off over the last several days, that showing up on the teleconnection, so it wouldn't be a shocker. But for now, let's just kind of stay in the moment, just to look at the next week or so, and not get too wrapped up in the long range until we can get a sense of how the whole pattern is going. Let's pull up the upper air here. Hold on one second. I'm just a little bit wiped out today. I've done a lot of driving over the last week or so, between traveling down here last Thursday with my drive down, and then I drove up from Savannah to Marietta yesterday, going which is north of Atlanta. That was an easier drive. It was only 4 hours, but still, it takes its toll out of you when you spend too much time in the car. Okay, so looking at the upper air, as we see this week, we've got this strengthening trough. Again, no blocking at all in the Atlantic. It's all low pressure up in the North Atlantic, and you've got pretty much a fire hose running across the Atlantic from Virginia straight across north of the Azores, probably to about Spain and Portugal. So that means everything comes in and goes out. And now you've got this next trough. Now this is for Friday night, where we've got this low moving up the eastern seaboard, and that trough just kind of lifts fairly quickly northward. You're starting to see the beginnings of higher than normal pressures early next week across Greenland and eastern Labrador, and then extending over the pole to Alaska. So it's kind of interesting that the model does at least attempt to put some higher than normal pressures up there, which means there's lower than normal pressures in the jet further to the south. You no longer have that Atlantic fire hose. The Pacific is actually behaving fairly well. We continue to see these weather systems crashing into California and moving eastward. Just want to run this through the long range. A bit of a ridge pops up in the east on the weekend of the 21st, 22nd. I mean, it's not too bad here in terms of the overall upper air toward the end of the, as we move toward the latter part of the month. This is actually supposed to be Christmas Day, which would signify at least that, we'd be in a northwest flow and probably some colder air around. Now, whether we get snow going into that or not remains to be seen. But the upper air certainly is attempting, boy, my beat, it's attempting to in the mid part of this long range goes to some higher than normal pressures. I just want to take a look at the 12Z run really fast, because I noticed that I'm just trying to run this through. So see, the 12Z actually, the earlier model run actually has maybe a bit more of a blocky look to it late in the period. This is Christmas Day, early in the morning, where you've got ridges trying to build from the east, from Iceland over into Greenland, and you also have higher than normal pressures over Hudson Bay, northern Hudson Bay, and over into northern Labrador, with lower pressures to the south. Not quite a 50-50 low, but close enough. East of Newfoundland, which doesn't really stay. It just kind of, gets there and then begins to lift out. So you know what? It looks like it's going to transition into something. Where we ultimately wind up, I'm not sure. But certainly will lead to some interesting times. I really think the pattern is pretty active here. It's kind of interesting to watch it all play out. Snow lovers should take a note of the fact that it's December 9th, and a lot of places, because of that big storm last week, has put snowfalls above average for the for the season so far, and then they're going to stay above average for a while, because some of those amounts were pretty hefty. Let me just take you through really quick what the Weather Service is doing and what the European model is doing. This is the European snowfall forecast map, and it's courtesy of pivotalweather.com. Which they've really done a fantastic job with the European model here, and you can go locally. I just wanted to pull up to show you that the snow amounts being generated here. These numbers were cut in half from what they were from the overnight run last night. So basically a 1 to 3 inch snowfall here in the New York area, and I'll pull up. You can go locally to south of there to cover Philadelphia and the Washington, D.C. area. You can see most of the amounts are generally on the order of an inch or two. And they also, we can look at the D.C., just again for, actually gives 1.6 at Washington, an inch for Baltimore. And in the counties north and west of D.C., Baltimore, 2 to 3 inch pockets here showing up in a few places. So that's pretty interesting. Even a 4-inch pocket up in northeastern Virginia. That's the Europeans' view from late today. And if we look at the regional view, let's see if we can get this going here. So there's your regional view here. Just sort of narrow stripe of about 1 to 3 inches running from southeast Kentucky, western Virginia, northeastward. I didn't look to see further south. I'll bring the full U.S. view just for laughs. And moving to southern New England. One of the things I'm noticing is the fact that the Weather Service really kind of went aggressive with snow amounts, and I'm just not, too thrilled about some of the numbers that they've come out with. But as we take a look, we have noticed that they have come down, and they actually are now more in line with what I'm having here. 1 to 2 inches in south central and southeastern Pennsylvania, for example, an inch or two across eastern Pennsylvania and much of New Jersey, in and around the New York City area, and for Connecticut. They've left their numbers the same. I don't know about this 3 to 4 band. That might be pushing it in my view. And Boston actually shaved off a little bit of their numbers as well. And I think that overall these numbers are running a bit too high. I'm going to see, I'll pull up my, this was my early call snowfall forecast map. I'm going to try to bring it up here on the screen for you. And so just stand by. See if this will work. And it's not working. All right, that's not good. I'll try it the another way. All right, hang on one second, folks. I'm going to try it a different way. So let me close this. Probably do it better if I pick it up on the paint box. Maybe that will do it. Except I made the map a little too small. Now I'm talking to myself. Okay, hang on one second, folks. I'll get the... All right, so it's a little bit on the small side here, but I'm kind of doing this on the fly. You see what I have in terms of my forecast, which is I did this yesterday. So actually, I was already lower yesterday, and the Weather Service has come into my numbers, which is not necessarily a vote of confidence. I don't know. I'm just kidding. But this is how I looked at it, and I have a narrow stripe of 1 to 2 and an area of 2 to maybe 3 that runs from just north of Washington, D.C. and Baltimore to close to Philadelphia to about New York City, western Long Island, southern Connecticut, in a zone of 1 to 2 that kind of narrows as it moves up into northern Rhode Island and south of Boston. And judging from how the models have behaved the last several runs, that sort of makes sense to me. So I'm good with that. And let me just also really quick, I just want to come back to the boards. I think you guys, I don't see anybody saying anything about my audio being bad, so that's a good thing. And, awesome. And good. All right, hang on 1 second. The SREF plumes might be out. So let me just check those real quick to see if they're telling us anything. And they may not be all out yet. So they usually come out about 8:45. And sometimes they come out a little early. So I'm noticing, okay, I do have ISLIP's number at 2.22. And let's see if we got White Plains. No. Bridgeport, 2.23 on a mean. So it looks like the numbers maybe are a shade lower on this run of the SREF than they were on the previous one. So it certainly, I don't necessarily, when I use the SREF model, it's not to look at whether the actual number, but it's more important that the trend is you pay attention to, and it's been kind of holding its own today, maybe just sliding down ever so slightly, but we'll just leave things alone. There's no reason for me to change the forecast. Thanks, Bill. I really appreciate you letting me know. You've just been having a really frustrating time with regards to having my audio settings just on their own change themselves was just utterly bizarre. I don't have any clue how that happened, but it happened. So I had spent most of this morning trying to fix it, and I had everything perfect for the last few weeks, and I still have some work to do when it comes to recording myself, because I use a separate program to do that, and all the audio levels were screwed up on that one. So anyhow, folks, I'm going to wrap it up at this point because I am really tired, but I wanted to get a live stream on tonight. So thanks for joining here. Had a nice crowd here tonight, close to 100 people on board, which is pretty good for a Monday. And whoever hit Super Chat, thank you very much. Really, really appreciate it. So I will try, just bear with me this week with the schedule. I usually try to stick to that 7 o'clock time, but that's the time my grandson goes to bed. So I might have to push it more to like 7:30, 8 o'clock during the rest of this week because I don't want to start my live stream until he's asleep. Because once he's asleep, he hopefully won't hear anything. All right, so everybody, have a great evening. Thanks again for being here tonight, and we will see you tomorrow. And who knows, maybe I'll see if I can try to get Joe Rayo on at some point this week. All right, good night, everybody.